So since last time that you were in studio, which has been a pretty short turnaround compared to most of my returning guests, has what makes A Tale of Our Time changed for you?
I would say a bit. I would say I still feel that A Tale of Our Time is a tale that deeply influences and shapes the people in a society. But when I take a look at this specific story, I see that it's not always about shaping the people, but it's inspiring people in the media and changing how people will tell stories in the future. And that's what A Tale of Our Time is. Changing the way we tell stories in the future.
Hello everyone and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. We tackle books, movies, comics, and more. Where there's a story, there's a reason to read. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, and I'm joined by my returning guest, Kyle Swayne.
It's nice to be here again. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, like I said in the intro, it is a relatively short turnaround to have a returning guest, but this is not necessarily serendipity. After our last episode, you and I were talking about books that we both consider to be tales of our time.
Yeah.
And I think at that moment I passingly mentioned The Road to you,
which I'd never read.
And then in that time since the last episode, you have read it.
Yeah.
And I had to have you on because, listeners, to come clean about it, I do not necessarily like the book, The Road, but I do really like the story.
Yeah.
And it kind of just comes down to like writing style. Regardless of my personal feelings, I do feel really strongly about this one. And that's why I had to have you back on when you said, you literally messaged me. You were like, so I read it. And good. I love it.
Yeah, it was really good. I just also love anything zombie. Well, it's post-apocalyptic, and I love that because, you have to figure it out. They don't give too much. It's very much like the iceberg method.
And also, they never really specify what the end of the world is.
Yeah.
So you can there's like so many different ways you could interpret what the apocalypse was in that book. And I think that's one reason why it has been like really repeated and why we see it especially. I mean, we have more time to get into this. Later after we do the summary, but I guess to put a bow on that, like I think that's one thing that has lent itself to The Road being represented in a lot of movies and books and video games today.
Yeah.
But some people might remember you. Is there any way you'd like to reintroduce yourself?
Oh yeah,
today?
Sure. My name is Kyle. I am a 34-year-old teacher from the United States. I'm a English and Spanish teacher in Taipei City. And I really love literature.
Now, the cat's out of the bag. The story we're covering today is The Road by Patrick McCarthy. I am shocked. We found out it was published in 2006.
Yeah.
But I could have sworn it was much older than that.
To be fair, that was like the heyday of post-apocalyptic stuff. You had like 1984. You had like all these...
people who were disappointed that the world didn't end when we changed from the 90s to the 2000s.
Yeah.
They
you
thought
mean Y2K?
Yeah, Y2K. People were scared.
Oh, I was freaked out.
But
then it didn't happen.
Yeah.
It was just like, whatever. People just like to make crazy stuff like that and just freak everyone out.
And speaking of crazy stuff, let's talk about what happened to the world in The Road. So, I guess a little bit more of a spoiler warning today. We will mostly be covering The Road, but by nature, I think we're going to kind of delve into a lot of the media that it has influenced. The most likely culprits for that are probably going to be
The Last of Us.
The Last of Us, both the game and the TV series.
The Walking Dead.
So those might be touched on if those are anything that you don't want spoiled. I don't know if this is a really good one for you or a really bad one for you. So look out. Now, Kyle, would you be able to give us a summary of The Road?
Yeah, no problem.
And for all our listeners out there, just a slight trigger warning for today's topic. The book gets into some really upsetting things that happen, especially concerning children, which we will be touching upon, but not in too great a detail. just another moment where if this is something that is not for you, perhaps this summary may not actually be for you either. So let's get into it, Kyle.
Yeah. So The Road is a book that is very simply written. It's not like overly complex with its wording. And it follows the story of a man whose wife has killed herself and a boy, possibly his son. We don't know if it's actually his son or if he's just taken this kid and taken care of him. And they are going through this post-apocalyptic hellscape.
From, once again, another important detail we mentioned before, but like the world has ended in The Road. We do not know why. They never cover it.
They hint at it. They say there's ash everywhere and everything is burned or brown.
There are a lot of hints,
yeah,
but they never tell us exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
What is important is that because of how the world ended, it is impossible to grow food.
Yes.
And there are no more animals that you can keep for food. So, like, food is a really big deal. It's a really big currency. Mm-hmm. And then also the man is dying. We assume from some kind of disease or organ failure or something like that. Right. Once again, it's not, I don't think it is specified.
No, he just coughs. He has a cough that the boy notices and asks about. And he just moves away from it.
Moves on because it's hard because he knows he's dying and he doesn't want to leave the boy alone in this world.
Yeah.
So those are also two important facts to like put out there about The Road.
Yeah.
And then their journey focuses on getting to the good people.
Yeah.
Who they believe are going to be at the end of the road on what I think is essentially the East Coast.
I think so.
So, but it all, again, very vague.
Yes.
So, back to where you were, though. Sorry.
They go through, like, different steps. Like, the first step is they meet these people in a house. And they keep smelling the smell in the basement. And so when the people are gone, they're trying to look for food. And what do they find? Prisoners with amputations. And they're like eating the prisoners. And then like later on in the story, they meet an old man. And the man specifically says, stay away from him. That's not an old man. Do not touch him.
But it's not really specified any farther than that.
Yeah. And he's blind. And basically all these people are moving along this road that spans the U.S., right? And they're trying to get to the end of the road, trying to find food and survive. But the whole time they're just talking about how they're going to die. And the boy's like, I'm going to die, Papa, right? And the old man is like, we don't have to talk about that right now. And then like...
They find a store of food from a bunch of people who committed suicide, which is a very common way to just like go out in this book.
Yes.
They have a Coke, they get some flashbacks. And I guess what else happens after that point?
They give food to the blind old man, but then like another guy jumps them and steals all their stuff. He like steals their cart, and then they find him, and he holds like the man holds the gun to the guy and says, "Take off your clothes, take off your shoes, give us everything you have." And they leave him naked in the street.
He basically robs him back.
Yeah, he robs him back. They take everything from him, which is a death sentence. Mm-hmm. And then the whole time the boy is saying, don't do that. Don't do that. No, we can't do that. We don't want to be like them. And so eventually they turn back. And he says, fine, we'll give him back his clothes. They turn around. He's gone. They leave his clothes and his shoes in the road. Obviously, the guy's going to die. And then towards the end, they're jumped and the dad is shot fatally and he's dying. Mm-hmm. And the boy has to say goodbye. And his last words are just find someone who carries the light. And so the last question that the boy asks to the people that come find him, which is a group of people, a wife, her husband, and they have 2 kids. Do you carry the light? And the guy's like, yeah. So we can presume that he did find good people. However, it's very much up in the air. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. It is that is true, though. I think it's a little bit more hopeful at the end too, because there's a lot of like reverence. The boy loses his either real father or father figure, so he sits there and mourns, and like the man and the people wait for him, and kind of there's a respect for that, for like love lost in a world that is just hardship, suffering, and seemingly like an inevitable, very cruel end. Yeah. And it's only after that, and kind of after some display of respect, that he finally decides to come with him out in the middle of like just a horribly difficult world.
Yeah. And it's very much like the book is about loss of innocence, because we see even the father, who is like deeply affected by this world, loses his innocence, and the boy is naive and innocent the whole book. And then he almost loses his innocence at the end, but pushes for goodness in a harsh world and then prevails in a way.
You know, I actually think I'm going to push back on you about that. I think it is. I think it's about fighting your cruel instincts too, because like something that I remember is the father at the very beginning, he always saves 2 bullets, one for himself and one for his son.
Yeah.
Because he does not want to, like in a world like this, he would not want to live his son, like let his son be cannibalized. And so that's what he saved them for. But at the very end, when the father is dying, like he did not want to let the son outlive him.
Yeah.
And at the end, he cannot bring himself to do it, to actually kill his son, which is, I don't know, kind of a good thing, I think, because we see that there is like a hope and a possibility for that. And it's letting that like that hope of something better win out.
Yeah.
That like the son who wants to be good and like wants goodness to go there, like he doesn't want to leave the man to die, even though the man did something that is like objectively very bad.
Yeah.
This is what frustrated me about it. The man who jumped them, he didn't want to leave him to die, right? So the son has the light, or the son is a good person in this world, and I think the father, out of love for this son, entertains it, but I think it also kind of gets to him. Like he loves the boy too much to deny him a possibility of a good existence despite what he said. And I think that's a good thing. Like that's how I read that.
But I think we're kind of agreeing though. Like it's about loss of innocence, but he inspires them with his own innocence, and he's the light.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could accept that interpretation too.
But it's also like an exploration of all the super messed up parts of humanity.
There's so little that is actually said. That a lot of it is how you're going to take what you are given, and a huge part of that is literally like not even giving names to people. Yeah,
well, it's like I was saying, Hemingway, he has the iceberg method where he writes plainly and he doesn't give too much information. It's like 95% underwater. You have to figure out the rest by yourself. He gives you the important information that you need, and then you create the universe in your mind the way that you interpret it, which is, I like that.
So we covered what your first experience with this book was, because this was like literally 2 weeks ago or so. So I guess what I really want to get into is like, so what meaning did you find in this? Like what made this so meaningful to you? We talked about the themes that you found in there, like loss of innocence or lack thereof. Is that what was meaningful to you, or do you think that there's more that could be gained?
I feel like it was an interesting story, and like it was very straightforward and not overly complicated, and it explored dark parts of humanity, and it explored like what would people do if they were in like an extreme situation, right? Like there's literally no positive. Everything's like a catch-22. Like you're gonna have to survive, okay, but for how much longer? Like are you gonna suffer because you're surviving? And I feel like in a way it's kind of like I don't want to be really dark, but it's kind of like society, right? Like everything is falling apart around us, but it's very much about like, you can't just like give up. You have to keep trying. And you got to kind of keep your head above it. You can't like lower yourself to these like negative people or harmful people standards or toxic people. So you have to like rise above it.
And so what meaning do you think that other people could get out of this? Why do you think that this is a tale of our time?
Well, like I said, I feel it's about not just that they are exploring relationships of father and son, relationships of people, but also that it is influential, right? Like a lot of people have read this in high school and it has influenced the way that they write their own stories or create their own video games, right?
Well, to that end, I guess we could take a moment to talk about the influence of it if you want. So
Sure.
We said up front, but one reason why I personally believe this is a tale of our time is because I think if the apocalyptic genre is something that you were interested in reading, The Road is a must read, because I feel like it is something that has been not copied, because I think that's a little bit too negative, but I think it is like a template, because there's so little that's explicitly stated. It makes a very good template for a good story, and you can see it reflected in a lot of other mediums. So like if we talk about especially zombies, you mentioned at the beginning, I think The Road is very applicable to almost any zombie media that you have read or watched or played since 2006.
Like The Last of Us I've played part of The Last of Us, and And I'm very much like, oh my God, everything about this, she doesn't have a mom.
Mm-hmm.
They're running away. There's like all these people trying to get them. And it's not just zombies. There's also like these really messed up people.
The bad people. I played The Last of Us the summer after I read The Road for a college class. And the resemblance was so strong that I felt like The Last of Us was a retelling of The Road.
Yeah.
Like there were beats that happened beat for beat, like with finding the fireflies. Those are the good people that we're looking for. We've switched the coast. We're going from the East Coast to the West Coast, but we're looking for the fireflies.
Yeah.
We think we're going to find good people along the way, but they're not there. We have to go to the next place, like encountering the den of cannibals, like having to lower ourselves to their standards. Like there's a lot of, I think, very direct parallels. And so I think that reading The Road is a really good way to inform yourself on like a lot of influential post-apocalyptic beats for that genre.
Which is also funny because there's no zombies in that.
So we are unfortunately out of time. Like this is one that I could go on about for so long. But if you were to give The Road your own subtitle, what would that be?
The Road. Always carry the light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's unfortunately it for us listeners. But, special thanks to you, Kyle, for coming on so soon.
I'm happy.
Getting to touch on something that I think really deserves, if I could give an award, I would give one to The Road, despite like whatever personal feelings I have about it. I think it's very influential. Also, rest in peace, Cormac McCarthy. Yeah. He tragically passed away earlier this year.
June 13th.
But his influence is still felt in so many different ways. I don't know. I hope it's what he would want. He certainly did it.
Yeah.
And I hope you all enjoyed listening today and learning about The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This has been Tales of Our Time on Radio Taiwan International. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, with my guest, Kyle Swayne. And we have been discussing The Road. Always carry the light, a tale of our time. And we'll see you next time.